Millstone was the kind of town that looked like it had been frozen in time. Rows of old houses with peeling white paint, a diner on the corner where the waitress knew everyone's order by heart, and children riding bicycles down cracked sidewalks until the streetlights came on. The kind of place where people left their front doors unlocked, not because they forgot, but because they believed they didn't need to lock them. And for decades, that belief held true. Crime here meant a stolen lawnmower, a teenager caught drinking behind the school gym, maybe a domestic dispute that fizzled out before police even arrived. But all of that changed in the spring of 2016, when a young nurse named Clara Reeves vanished. At first, it seemed like an ordinary missing persons case. A woman who simply stopped showing up for work. But what began in a creaking Victorian boarding house on Willow Street grew into something much darker, an investigation that left behind more questions than answers. This is the story of Clara Reeves, her mysterious disappearance, and the landlord who may have been much more than he seemed. Clara Reeves was 27 years old. She had moved to Millstone after a painful breakup and was looking for a new beginning. Friends said she was gentle, soft-spoken, and always willing to listen. She worked as a nurse at Millstone General, pulling long shifts in the emergency ward. Her colleagues said she carried sadness in her eyes, but masked it with kindness. She couldn't afford much, so when she found a room for rent at Harold Granger's old Victorian house, it seemed like fate. Harold was 68, a retired schoolteacher. He lived alone after his wife died a decade earlier. He was remembered as a strict man, but one who loved books, music, and, at least according to some, control. The house was decaying, flaking wallpaper, creaking stairs, a constant smell of dust and damp wood. But Clara liked the space. She told her sister over the phone, "It feels safe. He's strange but harmless. Just lonely." Her friends weren't convinced. One of them, Emily, remembered Clara saying Harold had a way of watching her that made her uneasy. "Sometimes I feel like he's listening outside my door," Clara once confessed. But she brushed it off. Rent was cheap, and she thought she was imagining things. No one knew it then, but those words would later haunt everyone who heard them. On April 12, 2016, a neighbor saw Clara coming home from the store. It was raining heavily. She clutched her grocery bags and hurried up the steps of the boarding house. The neighbor, Mrs. Fletcher, waved to her. Clara smiled, gave a small nod, and disappeared inside. That was the last confirmed sighting of her alive and well. The next morning, she didn't show up for work. At first, her coworkers assumed she was sick. But after 2 missed shifts, they began calling. No answer. By the 3rd day, her supervisor called the police. When officers arrived at the boarding house, Harold opened the door. He seemed calm, even polite. He explained that Clara had left in the middle of the night, packed her things, told him she needed to start over somewhere else. But when officers checked her room, nothing was gone. Her clothes still hung neatly in the closet. Her purse, wallet, and phone sat on the dresser. Her half-finished groceries were rotting on the counter. It was as if she had stepped into the house and vanished into thin air. Detectives asked Harold if they could search the house. He agreed, though reluctantly. The living room smelled faintly of ammonia. When they reached the basement, they noticed a heavy padlock on one of the doors. Harold's demeanor changed instantly. He stiffened and told officers it was private, filled with belongings from his late wife. The officers insisted. Harold refused. Finally, they forced it open. The stench of bleach was overwhelming. The room was empty, except for stacks of cleaning supplies and broken furniture. But what chilled investigators most were the marks on the floor, long, deep scratches etched into the concrete, as though something heavy had been dragged across it again and again. The basement was cold, silent, oppressive. The air felt wrong, like the walls themselves held secrets. Harold claimed ignorance. He said the scratches were old, from moving furniture. But detectives weren't convinced. With Clara missing, the scratches in the basement, and neighbors reporting that they'd heard shouting the night she vanished, suspicion turned squarely on Harold. The press descended on Millstone. Headlines branded him a predator. Commentators described him as the classic lonely landlord who snapped. Though police lacked a body, prosecutors moved forward. They charged Harold with Clara's murder. The town turned against him. People spit on the ground when they passed him in court. Some even vandalized his house. The trial was set to begin. And then, just as the case seemed certain, everything unraveled. 200 miles away, at a shabby gas station off a deserted highway, a clerk noticed a woman stumble into view. She was barefoot, filthy, her hair matted. She collapsed near the pumps. It was Clara Reeves. She was rushed to a hospital, where doctors treated her for malnutrition and traces of sedatives in her system. When she could finally speak, she told investigators a horrifying story. She claimed she had been kept in a small, windowless room, sometimes moved in the trunk of a car. She never knew exactly where she was. But she swore one thing: her captor wasn't Harold Granger. Instead, she described a younger man, mid-30s, dark cold eyes, and a scar across his left cheek. She remembered his voice. She remembered the sound of heavy boots. She even remembered him laughing when she begged for her life. And strangely, she said Harold had once tried to help her, slipping notes under the door of her prison. The courtroom erupted when Clara testified. Jurors who had already assumed Harold guilty now looked stunned. The prosecution's case fell apart. They had built everything on Harold as the killer. Now their victim was alive and describing someone else. The jury couldn't convict. The trial ended in collapse. Harold walked free. But doubts remained. Why had Harold lied about Clara leaving in the middle of the night? Why did his basement smell of bleach? Why were there scratches on the floor? Had Clara, traumatized, confused her memories? Or was Harold hiding a deeper secret? Clara left Millstone soon after. She never gave another public statement. Some said she moved states away. Others whispered she was too traumatized to ever live a normal life again. Harold, branded forever as the Silent Tenant's landlord, faded into obscurity. He sold the boarding house and moved to another town. He never spoke of Clara again. The police never found the man with the scar. And so the case remains a mystery. Was Harold a scapegoat, an old man caught in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or did he know more than he ever admitted? Perhaps the most chilling question of all. If Harold wasn't the one keeping Clara prisoner, then who was the man with the scar?